Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to Distance Travel, a podcast where we signify the lessons learned from the literal and metaphorical journeys of amazing individuals. And unsurprisingly, we have one very amazing and phenomenal lady with us. We have with us today Michele Tirman Olsen. She's all the way from Australia. And I am very thankful for her to connect today because, oh my God, it did give us a lot of inconveniences. And what's special about her is she was born in Germany and has traveled the whole world from the United States to Canada to Europe and Asia, teaching doctors and surgeons and technicians how to use extremely complicated technology in the medical field. Moreover, she's also done it all from being a mountain mama to being a single mother and just, leading herself, leading her, example. And it's amazing. But I don't know the whole story and I would love to listen. So thank you for joining, Michele.
Oh, you're most welcome.
So what do you...
It's a pleasure for me to meet you and to be.
So first of all, thank you for joining. It took us a minute, but we got it going. So you wanna talk to us about how did you get to where you are in Australia now? But start. I know it's a long story, but let's break it down. You've had a great journey.
Oh my goodness. Okay, how did I get to Australia? Well, first of all, I have to start from the very beginning. But I was born in Bremerhaven, Germany, in a military hospital. My father was a doctor. We traveled extensively. I'm one of 6, and I'm a twin. And so because we travel so much, I grew up in different continents, and I always was fascinated by different cultures, by the way people lived. And so it was always in my heart to move around and to discover the world. And so my father, being in the military, gave me that opportunity. So, and let me see, where do I start from here? So what we did was when we moved to England after Germany, and then we moved to San Francisco and Presidio and all the military bases. Then my father got stationed to Italy when I was 11. We drove across America in a blue Plymouth station wagon and got to New York, and then we went into a Goonie bird and then flew to Taranto, Italy, which is the instep of the boot in an Air Force base called Luigi Bologna. We called it Luigi Bologna. And then we moved to France, to Lyon, France, and President de Gaulle kicked all the Americans out, and we got stationed in Arkansas.
Wow.
And that's where the connection of Arkansas comes. My father was the hospital commander at Little Rock Air Force Base in Arkansas, but we were mortified to learn we were moving to Arkansas because we had no idea what Arkansas was like.
I think it's a repeating occurrence now. Everybody that I've talked to who ended up here before coming here had no clue what it represented. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes. So, but my father loved it, and this was around the time of the Vietnam War, and I was graduated from high school in 1968 and decided to go to the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. I did not have a clue of really what I wanted to do. I knew I was very interested in biology and sciences. And so every semester, basically, I changed. I did not know what I wanted to do. So when I went to university, I changed semesters quite frequently. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But I love biology. We had pig labs and we dissected animals, and that was really something that I enjoyed. But I quit my 3rd year because I wasn't sure, and I went to Colorado to kind of find myself. And I was going to be a waitress in the mountains and be a mountain mama, basically. But my father encouraged me to finish my education, and I'm so glad I listened to my father. And I remember seeing me I was in a phone booth on the highway going to Colorado Springs, and I spoke to my father, and he said, "Come back to Arkansas, finish your university degree, then you can go back to Colorado and work in the mountains if you want to. So that's what I
Huh.
did. So I came back and just, yeah, I listened to him. I'm so glad I
So,
did.
so
Because I wouldn't be able to
definitely
do it.
one of the advices to succeeding in life, living 101 is listen to your parents' advice. They're right.
Listen, listen to a person who's wise. And my father was
For
very
sure, for
wise.
sure.
And a real encourager. Yeah, so I went back to Little Rock and the University of Arkansas Medical Center, had 2 extra years and graduated in 1972 with a BSRT, which is a Bachelor of Science in Röntgen
Wow.
Technology. And so I had my degree, and I went back up to Fayetteville and worked in the geriatric hospital, went back to Little Rock, worked in Children's Hospital, worked at St. Vincent's Hospital, always in the radiology
Hmm.
department. But when my father was in 1982, he had a very serious heart attack, and he almost died from the heart attack. And there was an opening in the cardiac cath lab, and I was very curious about the workings of the heart and what happened to my
Hmm.
father. And I applied for the position in the cath lab. And that's where interventional procedures are done. That's where diagnostic studies are done in the cath lab. And I loved it. And the radiologist, the radiology technologist, all the
Oh
film,
wow! So
everything.
you're
So I
basically a
loved it.
radiologist. You're not
Yeah.
just working the radiology
No,
department.
I'm not. No, 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 no. A radiologist is a doctor. I'm a radiologic technologist. But what we did was we were the support people
I
for the
see.
doctors who were performing the. Yes. So I loved it. It was great. And at that time, there was only 2 companies in America that were developing
Hmm.
balloons to actually put into coronary arteries to help patients with atherosclerotic disease and to open up the diseased coronaries. And so I thought I could do that because it was something that was really interesting to me to train doctors. And the sales rep came into our lab, and this doctor from across another hospital came in, and they asked me to scrub in with the doctor on a new technology that I had not a clue on what to
Man,
do. And we didn't have any proper training, and I was very scared, and I thought, and I felt, I didn't know what I was doing, and I thought no one should feel incompetent just because they were not trained
absolutely.
appropriately. And so, yes. And so what I did was I started up a training program in the cath lab for nurses and technologists with new technology. And so
See, up until
what
now,
happened, the sales,
just in this,
I'm
just in
sorry?
this much, I wanted to highlight as we go is what you are doing, which is amazing. Like a lot of people should do this because you are being curious. Because first of all, your father's heart attack, was a tipping point in your life. Like, hey, I don't know what's going on, and I want to
That's
find
right.
out. Then once
Yes.
again, you didn't know what's
And,
what's going on in the scrubbing process, and then you were like, "That's not good. I want to find
no.
out." You know,
Yes, I'm very
and
curious.
which is a
That's
great
right.
thing.
And well, it was a launching pad for my career. And even that intimidation that I felt when this doctor was yelling and didn't we know what we were doing, that actually prompted me then to start having an in-service program. So sometimes bad experiences turn out to be the door opener for your career. And and so so this sales rep came into the lab. She had a piece of paper in her hand. It had 2 states written on it. One was Kansas and one was California. And they were looking for clinical specialists, and they were going into the hospitals looking for people that would be interested in learning the new technology and training the doctors, and they would give you a certain area in which you can do this. I was a young single mother. My son was 11 at the time, but I jumped at the chance. I called my friend. I said, I have a lead. I want to interview for this job. And so I was so excited. I interviewed for the job and I got the job. And what happened was I didn't have to move. the job was actually, they tailored it around me, which was fantastic because I worked a 6-state area based out of Arkansas because they knew I was a single mom and it would have been very hard for us to move. So it all worked out. But if I hadn't have jumped at the chance to interview, I would not have known it could have, I guess what I'm trying to say is be flexible. In an interviewing process, be flexible and open, because what happened was that it was in my own front yard, the opportunity, and I had no idea. I just grabbed the opportunity to interview and get my resume ready, and then I got the job. So my whole career opened up at that point.
Wow.
And yes, and I was so excited. It was just absolutely fantastic. So that's how I got into medical devices. I was a sales and applications specialist for a 6-state area. So I traveled around Mississippi, Oklahoma, Alabama, Arkansas, going to all the hospitals. And what's interesting is when you work in a hospital, every hospital environment really is the same. So I always felt very comfortable because these were people like me. And I wanted them to feel comfortable with the new technology, with the new products. And so they were me in the past.
Absolutely. Because you can relate to them because you felt the same helplessness they are feeling now a long time ago. And you don't want them to do that.
Yes.
And
yes. So it was great. No, it was really, I found my niche. I found my niche and I just loved it. And I think if you're passionate and you know your product and you make other people feel comfortable, it's a win-win. Because working in a cardiac cath lab can be it's very serious. Things can go wrong quickly, and you have to be able to maintain a level of composure. And so the most important thing, I think, with being a clinical specialist is know your product inside and out and be able to troubleshoot. And so I became really skilled at troubleshooting. So, and the only way to learn how to troubleshoot is actually being in a situation that goes terribly wrong. And then you just have to look. Yes. And I know it's
So
scary.
the best way to become great, to become a champion, the way you did, is to just throw yourself out there in unknown waters, basically.
Yes.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And one other thing I wanted to, point out when we were talking previously was, when you applied to this interview, a cool thing happened after you got the job is the nurse came up to you saying, so please, let's talk about that.
There was a nurse who was a part of our team because they were hiring, nurses as well instead of just. So anyway, she came up to me and she said, I'm smarter than you, and I don't know why you got the job. So I said to her, well, did you interview? And she said, no. So I said, well, who's smarter? At least I interviewed and you did not. So you don't have to be the smartest person, but you just have to be passionate, open, curious, and available, and go
Absolutely.
for it.
And the way you brushed it off was amazing.
But maybe she was smarter than me. You can be book smart, but you don't know how to apply your book smarts. And one of the things about my training in the University of Arkansas Medical Center, we learned on the spot. I was working in emergency rooms. I mean, it was an intense and very thorough training, but it wasn't just books. We learned on the spot. And I think that really helped me when I became a clinical specialist. Other training programs, like private hospitals, they rely heavily on book learning, but you don't really learn the application in a real life situation. You can read all about something in a book, but until you're actually in that situation, that's when it really rubber meets the road.
Absolutely.
So to speak. So I felt like the University of Arkansas Medical Center gave me the absolute best training as a radiologic technologist, which helped me in my future endeavors in my career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I was a sales clinical specialist for a company called Bard, USCI
Mm-hmm.
Bard. And I wanted to learn about international distributorship, because a lot of big medical companies in America work through distributors outside of America. And a distributor is somebody who represents the company in their particular country, and they may have a big portfolio of other companies' products. So I interviewed within Bard to move to Canada, because that would be my stepping stone to work the international market. And so I interviewed for that, and the lady who was responsible for the training program moved into a marketing position. So I said I would like to take over the training program in Canada. And I got the job. So this was in the early 90s.
Once again, you were like,
So I went up.
I would like to take that. And you reached out and you got it.
I did. I reached out and I said, and my son was 14 at the time. And so my son and I we moved up to Canada. And it's interesting that sometimes the Canadians, I don't know, they have an idea that Americans are like John Wayne, that we're going to come in and, pistols blazing, and we're going to try to change the way they do things. And that's not me. So the lady who was taking over her position, she immediately, didn't really want to work with me and help me understand the Canadian healthcare system. So when I went in for my training with her, she just said she had a migraine headache, pointed to her files and said, read it. And that was my training. And I was devastated because I didn't have a clue about anything about the healthcare system in Canada, which is very different than the American healthcare system.
Yeah, and amazing, like you go places and, without even having met someone, you are, greeted a different way just because of who you are. You see what I'm saying? Just because you had a label of being an American, you were treated differently. But that shouldn't be the case. And I'm glad you're not like that. No one should feel like that.
Yeah. Well, so I decided I could have quit. I could have, within a 3-month period, said I've had enough. I'm out of here. But I think you need to if you make any kind of change in a career or move or get married, anything, major decision like that, you need to give it a good year before you make a decision to leave. If like I had a difficult situation in Canada, and I wanted to leave very desperately, but I decided, no, I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to develop their library and their wet lab and their training program. I'm going to travel all across Canada. I'm going to interview people and find out what I need to know about the distribution network. And I'm so glad I did that, because it actually helped build a foundation of my understanding of how healthcare works differently in different countries. And that little did I know that I would be moving to Europe. I had no idea at that time. But after the year, I started going to conferences, and one of my former colleagues came up to me and he said, I'm with a new company. You need to look it up. And when I was in Canada, I was working with very high-tech balloons on a wire, interventional type products, and I had a very full portfolio, and it was very interesting work. And I asked this gentleman, well, what are you selling? And he said, hemostasis introducers, which is kind of the beginning of how you get into the body. I was already working with products that were involved in interventional procedures. So I thought, I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. But I just had this feeling that I needed to look into this company. For some reason, I had this peace And I think you need to follow your gut. It may not look
Mm-hmm.
right, but if you have, I followed what I felt that I was, I felt like, yes, I need to look into this. So I did. I prayed about it. I'm a Christian, and I prayed about it, and I had this really strong feeling that this was something I need to look at. So I decided I was going to interview with the company, and I thought, if this job is for me, the door will open very wide, and I'll walk right through
Right.
it. So I flew up. Was all excited. I flew up. I sat down to interview with the president of the company, and the company was called DAIG, D-A-I-G. And I thought it was a German company. And I walked in, sat down. The president came in to interview me, and he said, "Okay, tell me about yourself." So I put two hands on the table. I leaned forward. I started to talk. He got up and walked out.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I failed the interview. I was petrified. I thought, did I say something wrong? What's happening? He came right back in and said, "You're
Wow.
hired." So I didn't even interview 5 minutes, and he hired me.
Man.
So I knew that, even when you think you do a bad interview, you never
You
know.
really never know, because people, you can, there's
You
truly,
never
there's truly
know.
no way of figuring out what people are thinking.
I had no
Man.
idea, but he liked me. He liked my passion, and he said, "You're hired." And this was a very small company that were making peel-away introducers. An introducer is a tube that you put into a vein or artery, depending upon what type of procedure you're doing, to allow a doctor to put in a device, whether it's a heart valve, whether it's a stent, whether it's a balloon. So it's very critical way to get into the body. And like a peel-away is used for pacemakers. When you put a pacemaker lead in, then you peel away the introducer, which just allows the doctor to introduce the device into the patient. So I got the job. So it was fantastic. And so I was working in Arkansas, and I became the rookie sales rep. And I was only 6 months into the job, and I went up to the president and I said, "I want you to know what my long-range goals are." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "I'd like to work internationally." And he said, "Can you start tomorrow?"
Once again.
And I'm like, "Are you serious?" He said, "I'm serious." So I couldn't believe it. And all I did was ask. You never know until you
Just ask, man. That's
And
all you
what
gotta
my
do.
goals was, so I moved up to Minnetonka, Minnesota, and I started traveling with him back and forth to Europe because we had a distribution network in Europe. So he said, "I want you to watch what I do." And so he was the businessman, and I was the one that gauged the, because I'm a
I
people
see.
person, I could, I was that part of the team. He was the businessman, negotiator, and I was the people person so it was kind of a team. We worked together. So I wore many hats. I became a product manager. I was just involved in a lot of different things. And it's wonderful when you work for a small startup company, you wear many hats. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot from him. And then he said, "Okay, now after I worked 2 weeks with him in setting up various distributors, we're having meetings with distributors, I then traveled on my own training."
Wow.
And I was petrified. But just because I was afraid, I did it anyway. And I fell. The only way to learn is just to do
and you
it.
came out swinging.
And I did it, yeah. So I traveled around with all the distributors and training people back and forth. And so we did this for 5 years. And then, Yeah, and then St. Jude Medical, which is a major medical
One
device
quick thing
company that deals
I
with,
wanted to know before we,
yeah.
go too far into the story was, you were into the, Canada, and then you went to the international after you asked the boss. But what was the biggest change that you observed that was different from what American healthcare system works versus how Canadian healthcare system works?
Oh gosh, well, they have more of a socialized medicine. I mean, we pay in America, and I haven't lived in America since
Oh,
'96, so it's very
yeah, right.
different. So, but the healthcare insurance is really high in America, and they have more of a socialized type um, healthcare system like we do
Hmm.
here in Australia. They have tenders that hospitals they only work with certain companies. So, I mean, there's been a lot of changes now. So um, I really don't know how to answer your question because it was so
Oh yeah,
long ago.
no worries. I was just wondering, like
And
some of the biggest
yeah,
things, not just like technically, but just as you were going through.
but how you work with the doctors, it was really different. But
Yeah,
to describe the difference, it's really
no
hard for
worries.
me to. How do I describe the difference? I don't know, but it was. Yeah, it was. I think what I was interested in was learning how distributors work with
Right.
hospitals, and then companies, how they work with hospitals. And a distributor will only work with your product when you're there. So, and then when you leave, you have to make sure that they love your product, or else they're going to be they want to actually. It's more for you
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
that? Yeah, yeah. So
All right, back to where you were
yeah.
moving around, going the world, seeing places. Yes.
So yeah, it was interesting. So St. Jude Medical purchased DAIG. DAIG became a part of the division, a cardiology division, um, with St. Jude Medical, and they were looking for someone to help to transition from the distribution network to the direct field sales force. So they sent me, and I relocated to Brussels. But I had a dream. I don't know if this is the right place to say the
Yeah, go
dream,
ahead.
or if, but I had this dream 10 years before I even moved to Brussels. And I was in Arkansas, and I had this dream, and I labeled it a God dream because it was so vivid and so real. And I wrote it down in my journal. But I had a dream that I was standing in America, and America was black, and it was surrounded by neon lights. And I'm up in, it looked like the area of the Great Lakes. And remember, I haven't moved there
Hmm.
yet. And all of a sudden I looked up, and it looked like Superman was flying in. And I reached my hand up, and it turned out to be Christ, Jesus. And I held my hand up, and he took my hand, and we flew across the Atlantic Ocean. And he put me on the cliffs of Dover, walked me up this very steep cliff. At the very top of the cliff was a gate. There was no buildings. It was a huge continent. He opened the gate, walked me through it, and then with a big sweep of his hand, um, walked me through the gate. And then I woke up. And I woke up, and I wrote this dream down, and I saw that it was the cliffs of Dover. And I knew after I dreamed this dream that I would one day be living in England because of the cliffs of Dover are located in
Hmm.
England. So I filed this dream away, knowing one day I would be living in Europe. When I moved to Minneapolis and started traveling back and forth, I thought, well, why am I still living in America? Because my dream, and I had underlined Dover, my dream, I felt like I was going to be moving to Europe. When they sent me to Brussels, I received a manila envelope in the mail, and it was a relocation overview, and it was saying, welcome to Brussels. It was the international headquarters of St. Jude. Welcome to Brussels. A little information about the country. It's one of the smallest European countries, and it's situated on the Strait of Dover. And I almost fell out of my chair because I had underlined Dover 10 years earlier in a journal. And here I am moving to a country that's situated on the Strait of Dover. So I knew without a shadow of a doubt, I am to go to Brussels and work with this St. Jude Medical Company. So it was fantastic, but I was on a short-term work assignment. So my job was to transition. We got rid of all the distributors and then hired direct salespeople.
Okay.
And so when my position was finished in 5 years. I was to move back to America, but I didn't want to move back to America. I wanted to stay. I don't know if I mentioned my mother's French. I have French relatives that live in Paris. My grandmother didn't speak English, and I felt like, I needed to stay overseas. I wanted to continue on working internationally. And so I started interviewing with two. They were going to send me back. I interviewed with two competitive companies, and my boss came to me and said, I told him what I'm going to do. I wanted to stay. I'm interviewing, but I was interviewing with competitive companies, and I had signed a non-compete contract, which says I cannot work with any competitive company for a year. And he asked me, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go to work with this particular company. I hadn't even signed the contract yet, and I was fired. I was fired right on the spot. They walked me out. It was terrible. I felt like I was a criminal. I felt like here I was living in Europe. Now I don't have a job. I was fired. They were going to sue me because I was taking a lot of business away from them if I joined this other company. And so I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. But because I signed a contract, I decided I was going to honor the contract. And I had a lawyer in Minneapolis. We were going to countersue the company because he said, Michelle, you have a right. You're not in the wrong. They can't do this to you, blah, blah, blah. But I said, no, I'm going to honor it. I told this to the lawyer, and he said, you're crazy. We need to fight. And I said, no, I'm going to honor my contract. And because I did that, the company that was going to fired me and sue me, rehired me as they hired me to work in the export division with distributors in Eastern Europe, Middle East, and South Africa. So I believe it's because I honored a contract that I had signed and that the company came back and hired me again. It was
that was
amazing.
the most phenomenal thing I've heard, because doing the right thing, it can be painful for sure,
Yeah.
but in the
Yes.
end, in the
Yes.
long run, that is what matters. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes. And the fact that they hired me, and what I did was I decided to start up my own company. I became a consultant, and it was Tirman Medical
Oh,
Consultants.
okay.
They hired, I had an S corporation that I got a lawyer, and I figured out how to do that. And so I was the only, St. Jude Medical was the only client that I worked with. And so I learned a lot in that time. I had a board of directors, and it was interesting because now I was this businesswoman,
Right.
but I had a heart of a teacher. So what I did was I worked in Russia. I worked all across Eastern Europe. I worked in all these countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Czech. All these countries. I worked in all these hospitals. And like I said, all the hospitals, the environment is the same, no matter where you are. The accents are different, but the procedures are the same. So I felt very comfortable, even though I was in a foreign
Isn't that
country.
amazing?
And
No matter where you
I loved
go,
it, yes.
like in the hospital, it all stays the same, so you feel at home.
Yes, and so I trained all the distributors on vascular access, on how to manage groin management and how to work with uh, these medical device, these catheters. And so I traveled all across Eastern Europe, Middle East. I was in Israel. I was in Jordan. I was in every country in the Middle East except Saudi Arabia. I was in Kuwait, Bahrain. Fascinating places to visit. I was very interested in the culture. You have to be very careful as a woman traveling into these Middle Eastern countries. You have to have your hair covered in some of the countries. And so I bought books on how to behave as a woman in business, how to dress. It was quite interesting. And I think being in the military helped me with that.
Right, your previous experiences.
Just by yeah, fantastic. And I love the food in the Middle East. I went to South Africa. And so it was an absolutely phenomenal experience. Phenomenal. And so then I decided, yes, I tell you, the story is quite long, and people are probably going to be, oh my goodness.
Definitely not. It is so good because you are such a great teacher. As you said, you have the heart of a teacher. So, I'm also engaged, because you're going from country to country. And one of the things that you said, you pointed out, was amazing to me, but also somewhat insulting to you, because I feel bad because, you have to behave a certain way just because you are a woman. You know what I'm saying? That is ridiculous. That should not be the case. You are just as good as anyone else. You are even better because you are the only one with a company.
But you have to be sensitive to the culture that you're
Absolutely.
in. And you can't have eye contact with some doctors in the Middle East. You cannot shake their hand. And you cannot put your hand on another man on a shoulder or anything, because in the Middle East, it's very different. I mean, so I had to be very, very careful because I like shaking people's hand. I like looking people in the eye. And when you can't do that, it's a sign of respect for the country that you're in. I had another colleague who didn't care how she dressed or how she was in another country. And I was mortified because I feel you need to respect the culture you're in.
That's true.
And because I represented my company and myself as a teacher, I wasn't threatening. So, in the Middle East, women are not waitresses. Men are the cleaners. Men are the ones that bring their tea and coffee. Women, it's very different. Like in some of these countries that I was traveling in, it was really quite interesting. I have 5 passports because my passports were so thick. They were so thick that I had to get new passports.
5 passports.
And then when I traveled
You're over here. I can barely finish one, Michelle.
I mean, it's so I've got a whole file full of all my passports with all the places I've been. It's just been fantastic.
Truly amazing. Please keep going. I just want to keep listening to this.
Yeah. And I decided at this point, I decided that I was going to get an EU passport because I'm French. I was able to get a French passport because my mother, even though my mother lives in America, when I was born, she was still a French national. So I went to a lawyer and I was able to get a French passport. And I decided to join St. Jude Medical Belgium division with my French passport. So I joined St. Jude. Instead of as a consultant for them, I now became entrenched as a clinical specialist in the cardiology division. I was a trainer for them in Brussels, Belgium. And then I began to get this feeling again that I was going to go someplace else, and I wasn't sure where it was, but I just had this sense that I was going to move again. And there was a position in Australia, and I have a brother who's an MRI specialist who graduated at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. He's a medical doctor and MRI specialist, and he used to come to Australia to lecture. And he said, Michelle, if you move to Australia, you should move to Melbourne, because Melbourne is very similar to the European way of life. So, so there was a position with electrophysiology division in Australia, in Melbourne. So I had an interview on the phone with the managing director in Australia. And it was one of the worst interviews I ever, besides the 5-minute interview that the president walked out on me. This one, I was jet lagged. Didn't know if I really wanted to move to Australia. I was flipping around. I felt like it was a terrible interview.
Okay.
Because I wasn't convinced if I should move to Australia or not. But they were convinced they wanted me. And I think the only reason why I got the job was because when you work in a company for as long as I have, you have a reputation. And so they knew the type of work that I did, and they knew that I was a hard worker and that I was responsible and did what I said I was going to do. And so I think only because I was known within the St. Jude Medical that I got the job, even though I interviewed terribly.
Yeah, and I mean, that's for anything you do, right? Because if you forget everything, all the labels that come with you, the only thing that determines who you are as a person is the work you have done in the past. People only look in the back; they never look ahead, right? You can't.
That's right. Yes. And so I got the job as I was going to work in the electrophysiology division, which is we call them the electricians in cardiology. And then the interventional cardiologists are called the plumbers because they work in the coronary arteries. The electricians actually work on the electrical components of the heart. And I worked with those products before. So I decided I was going to go back into electrophysiology. So I moved to Australia, and when I flew into Australia, the sky was red. There were pockets of red everywhere, and it was bushfire season.
Boy.
And and one of the radiologists warned me. He said, Michelle, when you fly into Australia, don't be afraid if you think you're coming into into the end of the world.
Into the end of the world.
Because don't be afraid, because it's bushfire season when you're coming. So if you see red skies everywhere, the world is not coming to an end. You're coming into Victoria, and this is, and it was right. So I did. So
why did you take the job if you were not sure about it? Because you did say that, like, hey, I don't know if I wanted to go. You were on the edge. Previous times you were very sure. Your gut told you.
Yeah, but I had a piece that this is what I needed to do, and I was willing to give it a go. And I thought the worst case scenario is if I didn't like the position, perhaps I could change within the company, because the company has different divisions. You have electrophysiology, you've got your cardiology, you've got, other divisions. And so because I was so versatile and I had a lot of experience in many different areas within St. Jude, I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a go, almost like when I went to Canada. I'm going to give it a go. And I know you're flying on the other side of the earth, but I felt like it was the right thing to do.
All right.
But when I got to Australia, I was not happy in electrophysiology. It was not really what I wanted to do. And it was interesting because at the time that I moved here, they had a new sales leader and a new marketing manager, and both of them had no experience in cardiology. So what I did was I went to the managing director and I said, I know a lot about cardiology. I could help in the cardiology division with the new sales leader and the new marketing manager. Would you consider putting me back in as a trainer in cardiology? And they said yes. So again, I asked. I could have stayed in the job I was unhappy with, or I could, step out on a limb and say, and the worst case scenario, they would say, no, we want you to stay in your position. And the best case scenario is they say, yes, Michelle, we're going to put you in. So that's what they did. And I'm so glad they did.
Mhm.
And so I was back working in training in the cardiology department, in the
Feel like such a
cardiology.
cheerleader. I'm like, yes, Michelle, go. You know what I'm saying? Like, once again, you asked. I am so, like, it just takes a lot out of you, but you did it. And again, and again, and again, and again. You kept it. I love that.
And again, and, and I don't like to fail. Nobody likes to fail. And nobody likes to sink either. And if you're swimming as fast as you can, you want to keep going. And sometimes, you may have setbacks, but that could be a stepping stone into the right direction. And so, even though I was open to trying this electrophysiology position, I stepped back to move forward. If
Yeah,
that
it
makes
does.
any sense. I stepped back to move forward. So it was fantastic. So I worked with all the salespeople across Australia as a trainer. And then the company acquired another company, which was structural heart products, which is something that I was very curious about, but I haven't worked in before. So I decided at this time I'm going to become a sales rep. So I went from a national position down to a sales rep. So here's another time when I stepped back and took a lesser paid job to become a sales rep for structural heart products in just Victoria and Tasmania, so a 2-state area, just so I could learn about structural heart. And I fell in love with it. I loved it.
Wow.
And I thought it was great. And yeah, so let me see, where am I now?
Where am I now? You have had
I
such a
was there.
long journey.
Yeah, where am I now? Oh my gosh, at this point I was approached by the sales manager of W.L. Gore and Associates, which is a privately owned company based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And they had a product. They had one product, and it was to actually close holes in patients' hearts to prevent stroke in adults and in children, or to actually fix up structural heart defects. And they asked me if I would be interested into launching their product in Australia. And so I thought about it, and I thought, because it was a company that wasn't a Me Too company, and what I mean by that, it wasn't a copy product, it was something very unique. The materials were very body friendly, and I liked the concept of the device, and I liked how the company worked, the ethics of the company. So I said, yes, I will do that. So I left St. Jude Medical, having worked for them for 23
Wow.
years.
Long time,
Or
Michelle.
even longer than that. Yeah, a long time, to work for a little company that I didn't know. And so the working was different. It was very hard for me to go from a big portfolio to one product. Working from people who knew St. Jude Medical very well, that had a lot of market share, now to a company who had no market share that nobody knew about. So I had to really sell it. And I capitalized on customers that I had worked with in the past. I had a strategy. I knew what I needed to do, where I needed to go, and it paid off. And so I was able to start these, they were hospitals of excellence, centers of excellence, and I trained all the doctors across Australia that worked with structural heart patients, and it was fantastic. And so that brings me to now.
Wow. Okay. That was a long and phenomenal story, because it's just amazing, man. Like the things you have done, the things you have been through, the things you have given us just in advice, just in, knowledge is amazing. You really are truly a teacher.
No. But my father was a passionate teacher, and I thought, yeah, my father emulated. He was just a fantastic person. He loved different cultures. He liked people. He never met a stranger. He was very curious about, you know, he was an excellent physician and clinician, teacher, and I thought if I could be anything like my father, it would be great.
You did
So,
that. You did just that,
yeah.
Michelle. You went above and beyond.
I don't know. But anyway, but I loved what I did. And I think when you love what you do and you're curious and you're willing to take risks, willing to step out, willing to fail, and willing to get back up, brush yourself off, and keep going forward, then you're a winner.
Sure.
And I think I'd like to say that to all those who, like me, when I was in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I changed semesters every semester. I changed my major. I just wasn't sure. But look what happened. I mean, even though you're not sure, just follow your passion. I think when you follow your passion and do what you find interesting, I think then you'll go places.
For sure.
And and always follow your passion and your dream. And sometimes it may take a long time to get there, but just keep going. Don't give up. I think that's my advice.
Thank
Don't
you.
give up. So now I've stopped working July of this year, and when you identify with your work, when you stop working, you wonder, who am I? But I've been so busy, it's been amazing that I'm really enjoying now this next phase that I'm in. But I'm looking into working with people with disabilities. I've applied for a organization called Higher Up, and they actually, you can take people with disabilities to their hospital appointments, take them. There's a lot of different ways you can help people that are disabled, and I thought maybe I could part-time work in that organization and help people. So I'm still in that teaching, training kind of mode.
Yeah.
So
I love how you define the last statement. Like, when you have been working for so long, which is something you have been doing, and that's the only thing you are defined by, and that's gone.
Yeah.
Then what now?
Who are
Exactly.
you? Yeah. Yes. It could be quite daunting, but it's really been. I've embraced it, and I'm learning a lot. I'm painting now. There's a lot. I don't even know how when I was working, I didn't know how I found the time to what I'm doing now. I'm so busy. It's really good. So it's not anything to fear.
And that's exactly why I said that, because you're doing just fine, and I'm glad I met you, because hey man, like, I needed to hear that, and look, so many like me.
Now I'm just like you. I'm just like anybody else. I'm no different, really, really.
So you also crochet, right, Michelle? Do you also crochet, or do you basket weave, or was that?
Oh, I'm making baskets. Yeah, I basket weave, and I do portraits. I'm painting. I'm doing a series now called People and Their Pets. Wow. And I've done 12 already. And when I do about 25, I'll have an opening and a private showing, and then maybe do a silent auction. But that's something I've always been interested in, is art as well. So I had a minor in art when I was in the University of Arkansas. So I took art courses, and my father was a cartoonist. I have a twin sister who does cartoons and murals, and so it's in the family.
The whole family is just a whole family of geniuses and phenomenal individuals.
No.
Oh wow, that's amazing though. So
it's a great.
Oh yeah, for sure. So one thing I wanted to go back, and I had a couple questions as we were going through, because I had stopped you because the story was so great. Me and Michelle were talking, for the people listening, and she was telling me her story, and I was like, Michelle, you can't, please don't tell me this, because I'm gonna fake it when you are really telling the story, because it's so good. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to hold all my excitement, hold all my emotions. And so the question I had for you, Michelle, was, you had all these setbacks, and you were a parent, right? When you were doing all this, going through all these changes. So,
Yes.
you definitely, what do you do when you are judged, or when you yourself feel like you are judging yourself? When you were in a position like that, how did you deal with that?
Well, like I said, I have a strong
Mm-hmm.
faith, and so I would actually go to God and pray about it and talk to Him about it. So my faith has really carried me through all these setbacks because I believe that, you know, the ultimate, He opens the doors and He puts the desires in my heart and He fulfills those desires in my heart. And so I believe that God would, I would be victorious no matter what, even though it looks like failure. It's not like, and I know what I'm about to say is very cliche, but when you when you do a tapestry, when you look on the underside, it's very ugly, and all the threads don't make sense. It just looks like a
Mm-hmm.
mess. But when you look on the other side, it has a pattern. And I think every setback that I've had has helped give me character. And I know and strengthened me because I know, and I remember the times I fell,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember the times I succeeded. And so I would look back and say, okay, I got fired one time. But look what happened out of that. And look what happened. So I would always remember how I came through. And so I always held on to the hope that it's going to all work out because things don't always work out the way we want them to. And so what I do is I just keep, my faith is very strong, and I believe that no matter what happens, that I'm not alone. I never have been alone, and that
Yeah.
strengthens me. So yes, so I get my strength from
Wow.
God, and it's really intertwined in my life. And um, yeah, I don't know what I would do without my relationship with God. And I mean, some people meditate. Everybody has their own way of gaining
Mm-hmm.
strength. And I had a intense encounter with God when I was quite young, when I was 22. And I had a patient at the hospital at the University of Arkansas Medical Center. I had got mixed up in some crazy
Mm-hmm.
things. And this patient was dying of cancer. And he told me I needed to have God and Jesus in my heart. And I said, well, where is he and how do I get him? And he said, all you need to do is pray. And I'm like, well, how do you even do that? Because I was not raised in a church going
Mm-hmm.
family. My parents were disgruntled ex-Catholics, and I wasn't raised, but I was raised morally right, but I didn't know what having a relationship with God meant. So I went home by myself, uh, and I said, God, if you're real and you are who you say you are, you need to let me know right now. And I tell you, something happened just in my spirit, in my heart, and I think I cried for weeks. It was amazing. And that's when my faith actually was birthed at that time. That was June 22nd, 1972.
Wow. You really vividly
And
remember
I
that.
have never looked back. I have never looked back. Yeah. And I used to think, oh gosh, being a Christian would be boring,
Boring.
that, you have to change. I have to become a different person. I have to be goody
Goody goody.
goody. But that's
Goody
not it.
goody.
But that's not the truth. That's not the truth. It's not it at all. It has been the most supernatural, amazing walk with God. And I believe this whole career I walked with him hand in hand, and I have never looked
Man.
back. I have never looked back. Yeah. So I think that's who I go to. I have my quiet time in the morning, and I even prayed today before we started this recording because I want to be true to him and true to me, who I am. And this is who I am. It's a big part of who I am. So
Let's end on a fun note. Let's end on a fun note. So all these countries you have visited, okay? You've been to, Middle East, Russia. What is the funniest thing that has happened and in which country?
Oh my God, the funniest thing? Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. This happened all of a sudden this image comes to my mind. We were in Krakow, Poland. And we were going live on camera.
Man.
And I was training this doctor. We were practicing this particular procedure with our product before we would go live on the camera. And I was showing him what to do, and with a syringe, and he didn't do it right, and so he squirted himself in the face with saline, which is water, sterile water. And this is right before we went in live camera. And to me, he started laughing. I was mortified. I thought, oh my God, here I am trying to train him on what to do, and we're going to go live. And I'm so glad we did a practice run before the camera started rolling, because, and he didn't speak very good English. So that was another challenge. You have to speak very slowly, enunciate, and everything. But anyway,
that is funny.
I thought that was but that's in Krakow, Poland. So, I mean, I have lots of different stories, but that one was quite funny. And then, there's lots of funny stories. But I think I'm going to have to write my memoirs, because sometimes I pinch myself because I can't believe all these things.
You have to. You must. Yeah. You must write a book, and I will be the first person to buy it, Michelle. Please let me read it. Oh my God. So, okay, here's to you, Michelle, and here's to all the people you'll inspire who listen in on this and more. Thank you so much for doing this. I messaged someone who had, the name of Michele Tirman Olsen on LinkedIn, and it seemed like she had an amazing story. And today I've been talking to her for 4 Sundays, and getting to know her amazing story and bring it to the world. So I'm very proud to get to know you, Michelle. Thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so very welcome.